Okay, so we're back. Build successful, and now we're back in the editor for the game. And the first thing we want to do is, like I said before, the tendency might be to think, oh, I'm going to isolate every single thing into my own game content folder. You could take that approach. My experience has been that that can cause some problems. And when it does, you kind of have to go backwards. So my approach is if it's living up here because it's being utilized as a base class for this game feature plugin, as long as you're duplicating it in this directory, then if this gets updated, you at least have a copy of what you've done, and so you can go back and rebuild whatever you might need to reintegrate with any updates you do to Lyra. So that's the approach that I'm taking. If you want to go ahead and put things in here, user be warned, that's can sometimes break the way things are linked together in terms of assets managing and stuff. And if you don't have a lot of experience with Lyra, frankly, like I don't know all the problems that can come up with that, then I would suggest you kind of just follow what I'm doing because I know that this works up to this point. So yeah, so that being said, we want to go to our characters folder, and what we need to do now is basically there's a chain of a lineage of dependencies between the character default all the way through to the hero that we're going to spawn in the world. And so what we want to do is kind of get that based on our character C++ class that we just made, which we know is really just Lyra character, no changes. So we shouldn't be breaking anything here. So you can go ahead and just duplicate this, right? And you can call it character default my game or whatever you want to call it. Up to you. Whatever your name convention is. Okay, great. So this character default character class, we want to open that, the one we just kind of duplicated and made. And you can see that it has certain components that are built into it. So this camera component you can see is created with the character. Okay, and this is going to be an issue for us that we have to solve. I've solved it one way with the intent and hope to solve it in a more elegant way in the future, but I can show you how to get this up and running. And this is why we needed to do C++ changes, because Lyra is super third person centric. It spawns the camera in, and then it demands that that camera have a camera manager attached to it. And if it doesn't, any camera that gets created in C++, this is what I found, no matter if you make it yourself by overriding the camera in your own C++ class, as soon as you make a camera on the C++ side, the camera manager grabs it and takes control of it and causes lots of problems for a first-person shooter game. So ideally, what eventually we'll do is or what I'll do is figure out a way to create my own camera mode that's a first person camera mode so this doesn't get grabbed by the third person camera mode and pulled all around. And I won't show you the problems that come with that, but I can tell you that there are lots of problems with that. So I'm going to show you how to get around those problems from the beginning. Please feel free to try to do all this without doing what I'm doing and you'll see the issues. And if you get around it, leave a comment or on the forums, let me know what you found to be a good workaround for this. But we're going to want to get rid of this pre-built C++ camera component that gets spawned with every character. And that will be for now the one change, but it's a pretty major knock-on effect. The change itself isn't major, but the knock-on effects are pretty major that we'll make to the code. Okay. So, but the first thing and the reason why I did this first is I just want to go ahead and get this parented to my to the new character class that I just created, right? So this is called my my game character, right? Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and reparent that to my game character. Save. Okay, and I can just close this. Go back to the content browser. Under Heroes, now you'll see the next layer, right? So if we open up that, you'll see that this is going and finding character default, right? So it's going back to this default, and it's a child of that. So if we go back to Heroes, what we want to do is take this one and duplicate it. We're just creating a new hierarchy, a new chain of parent-child relationships. So my hero default, we can call it be hero default, just my game. Okay, great. So that's my game. And now with this one, we want to parent that not to character default, but we want to parent that to our my character, so character default. character default my game, right? It says you're going to break things, but you haven't changed anything, so you're not going to break anything. Save that. Okay. And then lastly, um, you can, so because now this is this, so the functioning game in that packages with Lyra uses this mannequin here, B shooter hero mannequin. And B shooter hero mannequin has a bunch of functionality built into it that we don't want to try to leverage right away. We want to, if we want this functionality, we want to build it up ourselves. But you can see that it's parented to B hero default, which is the one we just modified. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close that for now. I don't want that open. I don't need it for just now. And in our own game feature plugin now, because once again we can pull from here for our use here. This can't pull from this, and none of these other plugins can pull from this unless we give explicit access, but we can pull from this. In my game character, I'm going to go ahead and create a new blueprint class, and I'm going to look for B underscore hero default my game. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and let that be the parent, and I'm going to call this BP underscore hero. I don't know, we'll call it base. Oh, we'll just call it hero my game. Why not? Make things complicated. Okay, great. Okay, so now this has the parent. This is the parent of that class that we just made, right? Okay, cool. So what we'll do then is we will let's just get this running and up and running. I'll end the video once we get the character, kind of the third person character, running around in the world. And then we'll go back in another video and I'll show you how to do the first person stuff, because that's going to involve modifying C++ code for the camera. So let's just get to a certain point with this with third person, and then we'll go from there. So the way that Lyra is set up is, it's got an invisible mesh. It's got an invisible mesh that it uses as base mesh, and the anim BP for that is animation ABP mannequin base. Okay, so those two things go together, and then because it's designed to have character parts and a cosmetic system on top of this invisible mesh, which allows you to change skins at runtime and change your cosmetics at runtime, then the other parts of the mesh that you'll see as a player are actually parented to this and are using copy retargeting mode, retargeting animation blueprints, post-process blueprints to follow this mesh. And so we want this mesh to be our mesh, and then basically what we want to do is just move this down in the Z by 88 so that it stands at the bottom of the capsule, right? Its root component stands down there. And yeah, so from there, then we want to, so once we've done all that stuff, right, we've gone done that, got that set up, the first thing we want to do here is we want to go ahead and add the pawn cosmetics component. So B mannequin pawn cosmetics, and we just call this pawn cosmetics component. Okay, so this is the component that's going to be the mesh that's going to manage the mesh that the player sees, that everyone in the world sees. And again, this can be swapped in runtime, right? So on this component, there's a function called onCharacterPartsChanged, and so we want to go ahead and call that function in the event graph. Okay, so once that's called in the event graph, we want to link up some animation layers that are associated with this. And so this depends on what you want to start off with. For now, we'll just go ahead and start off with the unarmed anim layers, just to show you that get this all working, and then we'll change it as we kind of begin to add first person link anim class layers. Yep. Okay, so link anim class layers, the mesh gets pulled in. You can always pull the mesh in and do it that way. And the anim class layers we want to link to this, we're just going to call unarmed for now. Okay, AVP unarmed. And there is a difference between the male body type and the female body type. So the feminine layers are for the feminine body type. And so if you're using a feminine character as your primary mesh, there's a separate one. You can use the feminine, and if you're using the masculine, you can use the unarmed anim layers here. So there is a difference. Okay, great. So compile and save that. All right. So now we have some more things to do before we get to being able to spawn into the world. Some of the first things we have to do basically are, let's go into our plugin folder. Let's go to game and in character. In this directory level here, we need to create a Lyra pawn data asset set, pawn data asset. So if you go under miscellaneous and go under data asset, and then you search for Lyra pawn data, we need to create one of these, and we'll call this DA underscore hero pawn data. Okay, and then we need to create an ability set data asset. So we're going to go ahead and do this. Let's go create a data asset, and we need to create a Lyra ability set, because Lyra has its own data asset for that. So DA hero ability set hero. Okay, so we have those two things. And then we need to create an input config. So let's go to data asset. Let's go to Lyra input config. I'll explain what these do as we go forward. So let's get them made. And again, DA underscore hero input config. Okay, great. So you can call these whatever you want to. This naming convention is typical. DA for data asset, and then some other thing that tells you what's going on there. Okay, so back in the content browser, we've got these three data assets. We have the input config, the hero pawn data, and the ability set. So let's go ahead and set up the hero input config first. So in here we have native input actions and ability input actions. So native input actions are things that are granted to the character without having an ability, an ability associated with them. Let's just say a gameplay ability associated with them. They are natively given with tags and then implemented somewhere else besides a gameplay ability. So things like moving, crouching, and looking are all done without an actual gameplay ability being built for each of these actions. And so native input actions are things that just take input and then don't have an ability respond to that input. They're just given somewhere else. So whether it be the NMBP or other places, they set a tag and those things respond from there. So that's the difference there. So we're going to add a couple of native input actions right away. So one of the ones we're going to implement is move. So IA move. And let's put that there. I'll show you in a second where that lives and why we're doing that. So input tag move is going to be, so we're going to add the input tag, and we can just input tag, follow it down to move. Okay, so that's just an input tag down to move. So this input tag is added to that ability's input action. So when you make this input action active, whatever it is, that tag is activated. And that tag being activated propagates through the system, and anything that's associated with that tag gets triggered. So that's how the gameplay ability system works, and it's why it's so powerful. So these tags are replicated, and they propagate through the system once they're kind of turned on and turned off. Okay, so the next one we add basically is for looking, right? So we're going to need to look with our mouse. So look, mouse, do that one. And this one's going to be input tag look. And there's under look, there's mouse and stick, and we'll do mouse for now. And then the other one we can add right now too, which is again native because it's based on the character movement component, is crouch. So we can add that here as well. So let's add crouch as well. and the tag it's going to get is crouch. Okay, so those three there. And now in terms of gameplay abilities, we want to add one here that's basic, but it is instantiated as an ability instead of just a tag on another component. And that's what we want to add jump to this one. So we have an input action that's called jump, but it is still utilizing gameplay tag when we need to jump. But this is instantiated as an ability, and that's why we're adding it as an ability input tag. And I'll show you that in a second. So let's go back and find out where these live. So you can see that these live in the top directory, content input actions. Okay, so all of these are input actions that can be shared through any of the plugins. So we're just going to use these unless we need to make something that's specific to our game, in which case we will bring that here and we will put that into our game folder. But for now, any of the basic stuff, we can leave it here. It's super basic, and it's really the baseline for implementing these different inputs. So we can just go ahead and leave it here. That's at least that's the way that I'm doing it. Okay, and the way I think about it. Okay, so now that we have those inputs added, what we need to do is we need to go ahead and grant some of those abilities at the beginning of when we spawn into the world. So if we go back to our character, you can see we have the hero ability set. So the hero ability set, these are the gameplay abilities and other things that we grant to the player as soon as they spawn in. And we associate those with the gameplay abilities that have been built, that we've built in a sense, or that have been built that we're leveraging. Okay, so one of those is jumping. Okay, so we want to go ahead and grant the ability for the character to jump when they want to jump, and that's here. It's already been built. We can go look at it in a second. And then the tag that is associated with was input tag jump, right? So you can see that the gameplay ability is linked to the tag. You can also see that the input is linked to the tag. So when the input comes in from the controller, the tag is turned on, is flagged. When the flag is turned on, the tag instantiates or calls the gameplay ability. The gameplay ability, which is located here at the top level again, heroes abilities, so in this top level directory, the gameplay ability, which is built here, has an activate and an end, but when it's activated, it calls jump. It starts the ability state and it does a few things here. It has an async wait node and then it ends, right? So the gameplay ability itself is making the character jump. So that's how the flow of this works, okay? So once again, so the the input, whatever it is, the stick or the keyboard, makes the flag become active, okay, activates the flag, the tag, and as the tag becomes active, then the gameplay ability associated with that tag that's been granted to the player, to the character, is then activated. So that's the basics of how that works. And for now, we only really need to activate this one ability for now. We'll do more later. But for now, let's just leave it at that. One question might be, well, why aren't we adding crouch here? Well, because crouching is not a gameplay ability. Crouching is based on the character movement component and has its own functionality built into the built directly into the animation blueprint, and so there's no gameplay ability associated with it, so we don't need to grant it. Okay, so all right, so there's that. So that's the hero ability set, kind of at least top level. We'll add more later. All right, and we're basically done with the input config for now as well. We'll add more input config items as we need them. Okay, so we can close those two things down. Okay, so back to the content browser, going back to my game content. The next thing we need to do is we need to add those things to our pawn. Okay, so so if we open up pawn data in game characters under pawn data, okay, so now this is the data that's associated with this particular hero pawn. And we can associate this data asset with other things, but this is the one that is going to be associated with this pawn. The pawn class that we want to spawn into the world and be associated with this is my hero be hero my game, BP be hero my game, right? That's this same pawn that we created in this same directory level. Okay. The ability set that we want to grant to this character is the ability set that we also created in the content browser here. So we can give that to this component here, right? Oops, sorry. Ability set, we need to add an ability set here, and we can give that our DA hero ability set to that. Tag relationship mapping we can do later. That is how tags interact with each other and the rules um, under which they operate. So we'll get into that later if we need to. Okay. So the input config is what we created earlier. So it's the DA hero input config. And the camera for now, again, we're going to do this for now. We're just going to use the built-in camera mode third person. So that's here. And you can see that camera mode has all of these things built into it. This is coming from a camera mode class back in the code, and it has all of these parameters kind of built in. And this is the third person offset curve, which lives in that same folder, which then defines where does the camera sit relative to the character's body. Okay, and this is obviously the camera that the player looks through. So we have to kind of get rid of all this stuff, right? Because eventually, because first-person shooter is obviously the camera's somewhere else. So, but for now, just to make sure everything works well, we're going to just go ahead and leave that as a third-person camera and get everything set up. Okay. So the next thing we need to do is add an experience definition to our game. So we'll go to experiences, blueprint class, and let's look for Lyra experience experience definition, and that's the parent of this. And let's call this BP my game experience definition. Okay. So in here, this is kind of like a game mode, basically. It has a lot more functionality in a way, or different functionality, but it's like a game mode. So the game features we want to enable are the game features is your game feature that you're basically that you created earlier. So again, this is one of these weird things where you have to enter the name. So best thing I've found to do is to make sure to get this right. Just go back to my game content. I mean, obviously this is super simple, but whatever your game name is, just put that here. Okay, and the default pawn data is going to be the hero pawn data that we created earlier. And then in terms of action sets and actions, we'll get to that in just a second. So yeah, so we're going to do that in a second. So let's go back to here, and we'll go to game character, games, and cosmetics. And under this cosmetics folder, the first thing we want to do here, or the thing we want to do here, is basically create a new blueprint class and base that on Lyra controller. Lyra controller component character parts. So this is here. So this thing that we're making here is we're going to call this pick character parts. Pick character parts. Let's call it pick character parts. Okay. So this is going to tell the game which cosmetics to spawn onto the invisible mesh when it spawns there. We had already set up the the character parts and their animation, but we don't know, we haven't told it which visual cosmetic to display when we do that. So we want to create off of event begin play, we want to call the function add character parts, right? Add character part, and the new part struct, we want to split that, and we're just going to call it explicitly here. That new part we're going to do is just the basic mannequin, the male mannequin. Since we use the male mannequin and a BP, we'll use the same mannequin there. Okay, so that is going to tell the gameplay experience what it should be spawning into the world that we are all going to see. And you want to do that under so basically actions. You want to add a component. So the action you're going to take is to add a component, and the component you're going to add is going to be of actor class controller, right? And the component class that you're going to add is BP pick character parts. Okay, and yeah, that should be good. Okay, so compile that. All right, so now our experience is pretty much filled out here. And so we have an experience there, so let's go back to our content folder. Okay, and let's go ahead and go into here and let's create our first level. Okay, so we're going to go to File, New Level, and let's just do a basic level, create that. Okay, and let's just save this straight off. Save current level, and we'll save it in our maps folder. We'll call this my game level. Oh, let's do the typical Lyra thing, L underscore my game level. Okay. All right, cool. So save that there. Okay. So now in the my game level defaults, what is our default game experience? Well, it's going to be our own game experience. So my game experience definition. Okay. So it kind of takes over the role. It takes the role basically of the game mode in a sense here. It gives the level more information about what to do when we spawn. Okay, so we're going to spawn in right now. You'll see we'll have a little bit of a problem, but I want to go ahead and do it right now anyways. So let's go ahead and spawn. Oh, okay. So yeah, so you can see we're spawning in and we can move, right? Once things kind of settle down, and we can jump and all that stuff. So this is where we get to in the first tutorial. Just want to show you this so that we can get all this stuff set up. So we haven't given any other abilities here. All we can do is run, move, look, right, and jump, right? So that's where we're at. So now that we're here, at least we can kind of go forward, and given that we have a character now, we can start working with the camera and do all the first person stuff we need to do, and then from there begin to give some of the functionality for for the first person shooter. Okay, so I'll see you in the next tutorial. Thanks.